ocean warming is really one of the most important things that we have to pay attention now. The world will self-regulate itself around the new temperature of the sea, whether that new way of regulating is supporting human life and human development. That's really the open-ended question.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be your host for the VC10X podcast. And today we have Dr. Francisco Saraiva Gomes with us. Dr. Francisco is a founding partner and chief investment officer at Ocean 14 Capital, where they're investing in venture and growth companies and technologies that offer sustainable solutions for our ocean, whilst generating an attractive return for their investors. In this episode, we talk about why it is important to pay attention to our oceans, biggest problem areas or subsectors within the ocean economy, why only 9% plastic is recycled, implications of ocean warming, what are blue foods, exciting portfolio companies, and lots more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. Hey Francisco, so good to have you on the VC10X podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, Prashant. Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me here. Everything is going well. How about you?
Yeah, same here. All going great, and so good to have you here on the podcast to discuss the ocean with us, because that's an aspect that we haven't discussed yet on the podcast, investing in the ocean. And even though that's basically from 70% of Earth's surface, right? We should have covered that before, but here we are today doing that. So to start things off, can you tell us why it's important to pay attention to our oceans and why they are an important part of everything?
Absolutely. Well, you shouldn't feel bad because there's a lot of people like you that are, know the oceans are big, know the oceans are important, and yet it's not at the forefront of our concerns. But it should be. It should be. It's one of the most important things in the planet. It's by definition the most important natural asset of the planet. The planet as is a living system that organizes itself around the oceans, and it's around the oceans that human development has taken place. And so today, nobody really knows how big the ocean economy is. We like to say 2.5 trillion euros as a number. People say that it's much larger. The point is that it's an unorganized economy made of very different industries, very different sectors, and that mobilizes most of human resources, and that mobilizes most of the natural resources that human activity requires for its development. And now, without ocean health, there is no planet, and without ocean health, there is no good human development or sustainable development. It's a quintessential part of who we are, and whatever we're going to get as a species requires an understanding and a nurture of our oceans, for sure.
Right. Totally agree with that. And while I was researching for this episode, I came across the SDG 14. That's the Sustainable Development Goal number 14 by the United Nations, right? So can you throw more
Yeah.
light on that? What is SDG 14 and how is it related to the oceans?
So, as the SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and the goal 14 is about the oceans. It's about conservation and sustainable use of the ocean, seas, and marine resources. And it basically has four targets within that goal. One is to reduce marine pollution of any kind, of all kinds, from land-based activities. So prevent that pollutants that are originated by our activity inland end up in the ocean. The second goal is really to protect and manage the coastal ecosystem, so that the part of the oceans that comes into contact with land, and to strengthen the ability of those coastal ecosystems to resist pressure, environmental pressure, but also to resist economic pressure. The third goal has to do with ocean acidification, and that's a direct result of CO2 concentrations in atmosphere. So higher concentrations of greenhouse gases lead to lower ocean pH, and that has all kinds of effects on the ecosystem, of which coral bleaching is probably the one that is most talked about. And of course, the fourth goal is overfishing. A big part of the human activity in the oceans has to do with this aspect of fisheries, and we don't often recognize that. But this is the only aspect of human activity which is still very much like it was in the hunter-gatherers days, right? We don't hunt chickens anymore like that. We don't hunt pigs like anymore like that.
Right.
We have very good technology on the boats, but it's still hunter-gathering. And so we got to make sure that that overfishing stops urgently. That's a key part of our of SDG 14.
Absolutely. And we are going to dig deeper into different aspects of this answer that you just gave. But this is very interesting to learn that we humans are living mostly on land, and the oceans are that's the place where the fish lives, and there is a lot of marine life there, right?
Yeah.
And we are not just taking out that marine life for our use by overfishing. We are also polluting their home, the oceans, and it just doesn't feel good because as humans we should be doing a lot better and taking care of planets as a whole, because if we are the most intelligent species on the planet, then it is also our responsibility to take care of all the other species as well, which we don't seem to be doing right now. Correct?
Well, there's a lot of philosophical stance in those questions, so there's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I would say that it's not a question of spirituality or of religion or moral. I think all of those aspects are present, and so one can take the discussion there. I like to think it in a more pragmatic way. Our children are threatened, and their children are threatened. And my job number one is to be the father of four children. I would do anything and everything for them. And one thing is, to see your child under a bus, you react, right? Um, I think we are endangering the life of our children, and I think we are definitely endangering the life of their children. And it's in the future. We don't see it. It's not in our face, but if you pay attention, it's momentous what we're doing to the planet. So it requires action for sure. It requires action.
Yeah, totally. And also, recently there was a high seas treaty that was signed with multiple important nations coming in and signing that. So, can you throw more light on what high seas treaty is and what are the implications of it?
Of course, we're very happy with that outcome. It was something that was more in the 20 years in the making. It was supported by people that are also our advisors. One of the people that is responsible for that success is a man called Oysten Thiel, and he's one of our most important advisors to our fund. The High Seas Treaty is about a multi-country, multi-jurisdiction agreement on how to exploit and regulate the high seas. And the high seas is kind of a no man's land. They're not owned by anyone. It's a resource that doesn't own is not owned by any country, and so no, there is no current legal framework or legal jurisdiction that can affect how one fishes in those seas, how one exploits mining or mineral resources in those waters, and all other activities. And it's very important that we regulate that area. Although it's not part of the of current legal frameworks, it's a lot of the benefits and the ecological benefits of the ocean happen in the high seas. And so the High Seas Treaty is really this momentous occasion where a lot of countries in the planet came together to regulate a common resource. Not one of their resources, not a bilateral resource, not even a transnational resource. It's a global resource. The high seas is a global resource. In my perspective, it's equivalent as us determining how we would exploit the moon. It's something that belongs to all of us and belongs to none in specific. So a very momentous occasion. We now have a legal framework. It's a step. It's not the full answer, but it's a step in the right direction. And it was something it took more than 20 years to get us here.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely an important landmark in this entire journey of like protecting our oceans. And now let's talk about your investment thesis at Ocean 14, right? So, what are the kind of companies that you're trying to back, what's your focus at Ocean 40?
Great. So look, we are an industrial private equity fund with a strong environmental focus, and we can be considered as an environmental private equity fund with a strong industrial focus. We Our main thesis is one of convergence, and by convergence we mean that there is a space in the blue economy, maybe not the entirety of the blue economy, but there is a significant space in the economy, in the blue economy, where what is best for businesses to accrue economic gains, it's also what's necessary for them to alleviate the environmental pressures. And so, if you think of financial capital and natural capital as two sides of the same coin, and in industries or until now, human developed, those two sides were not always connected, and sometimes you could make money without addressing environmental externalities. And certainly, you could address environmental externalities without creating economic gain. We believe that in our industries, that convergence is now here. And so there is no more false dichotomy. You either do good or you either do money. So that is our first layer of thesis, is to bet on the companies that have a business model and a business activity that is fully convergent with environmental needs. The second is to not go into early stage venture. We believe that there is a lot of capital already going there. We believe that these are industries that don't scale up like Silicon Valley models do. So they're not IT or biotech based. Some of them are, most of them are not. And so, if you want to create environmental gains, and if you want to create natural capital in spades, in large amounts, then you have to go where the industry is. And so, not to disrupt the industry one startup at a time, but to improve the industry one growth equity case at a time. The things that these companies need to grow, become more capital efficient, have larger customer bases, have better revenues, more profitabilities, are the same things that they need to do to alleviate their environmental footprint or to improve their regenerative effect on the ecosystems. And so we put our money behind those businesses that are in industrial phase, that they are proven, they are on the ground, they're working, but it's through their growth that we're going to get more incremental benefit. Our stance is that it is time now to create what we're calling blue platforms. We took the concept of platforms from the private equity industry, a business that is so good that the best use that you can make out of the money that comes out of the business is to put it back into the business again. So we want to take that approach and put it on natural capital, a business that is so good in protecting and regenerating natural capital that the best use that you can make out of that natural capital is to give it to that business so we can continue to curate it and exploit it in a sustainable manner. Right? So I would
Right.
say those three elements are the core three elements of our thesis: convergence, sustainable industrialization, and blue platforms, data-led blue platforms.
Right, absolutely. And within the blue economy, are there any subsectors or different big problem areas within which you categorize all the different deals you do?
Yeah, so we focus on five key industries: aquaculture, fisheries, seaweed, alternative protein, and plastics. And you could think of those five key areas as five key themes of the blue economy: how to sustainably farm the oceans, how to sustainably harvest the oceans, how to sustainably develop seaweed into a new source of biomass into the industry, how to replace how to create protein that replaces fish from the sea, and fifth, how to prevent plastics from going into the sea. There are more thematics, but for our first fund, we're focusing on those two.
Right, absolutely. And can you give us an example of maybe a company that you have bagged in a particular space and what problem are they solving?
I can give you two great. We've so far we've made four investments.
Sure.
We're very active. We're making more investments this year. I think that one great example out of our initial portfolio, I'll give you two examples. One which is more disruptive and more venture. The other one which was more industrial and more established. So in Sayaqua, a shrimp genetics business that not GMO but genetic selection. So it breeds shrimp for shrimp farmers. Um, in that company, we are pursuing um, um, uh, um, a scale thesis rather than a depth thesis, where we are trying to create a portfolio. We're trying now, we are delivering a portfolio of solutions to the shrimp farmers: genetics, nutrition, data, environmental services, equipment. And through that portfolio, the shrimp farmers can become more efficient. And so, on an aggregate basis, our thesis is that our customers will become more efficient in terms of unit of land or unit of water for every unit of shrimp produced. So that's a service play, that's an equipment play, that's not a farming play. On Tilibras in Brazil, we follow the depth play. We think that whitefish is an aspect of protein that has yet to be fully developed. That there's a lot of whitefish coming from fisheries. There's a space for whitefish coming from farming. And we thought it was important to create the right company, invest in the right company from the beginning. And so in Tilibras is the producer of tilapia, of whitefish, and it has a unique site, highly sustainable. It does farming in a very sustainable manner as well. And so that is a depth play. I misled you. I told you I would give you two examples. Let me give you a third one real quick. Those two first ones are industrial examples, one of scale, the other one of depth. Let me give you a more venture example. In Aon, a company in Norway, late stage venture, not yet fully growth, but already established, already with sales, doing a wonderful job. They are developing alternative models of how to capture plastic and recycle plastic. So instead of letting the plastic go to the municipal infrastructure or to the industrial recycling infrastructure, which is not always economically efficient, which not always incentivizes recyclability, Aon is trying to make sure that as the big corporates like I won't say their customers' names, but we're talking about big consumer good companies, big retail companies, big food restoration companies. As they are relinquishing and discarding their plastic waste, they find ways where that plastic waste comes back to them in a value accretive manner. So therefore, alleviating the need to take plastic to a recycling infrastructure. So those are three very good examples of how we are approaching economic gain and environmental gain simultaneously.
Absolutely, those are all very interesting startups. And you mentioned about the company that's helping more plastic get recycled. And I learned while researching for this episode that that is actually a big problem. That only 9% of plastic is actually recycled, right? So can you help us understand the depth of the plastic recycling problem that we still have?
Well, one has to understand that it's a global problem. It has different expressions. Uh, you could divide the world in advanced economies that are capturing all of the plastic waste, and then growing economies that are still not capturing all the plastic waste. The first issue is that recapture. There is a lot of plastic that ends up in the sea unnecessarily. There's collection and waste collection models have been well established in key economies, but there is no economic incentive to do that in some other economies. So some of the most polluted rivers are, for instance, in Southeast Asia Pacific, and you have to go to one of those rivers to understand the magnitude of the issue. We're talking tons and tons of plastic that go through the river every day end up in the sea. The in the developed or in more developed economies where either by regulation or by law, in some cases it's not even regulation, it's just pure legal settings. There is a complete incentive to capture all plastic waste. Now, that doesn't mean that all that waste is recycled, and the recycling of plastic follows economic incentives. The basic answer to your question is by and large, it's still not economically efficient to recycle plastic when compared to buying virgin plastic. And that's the reason why, right? So our thesis there is really to work on that economic benefit of recycling plastic. There are technologies that are now very efficient. Everybody knows that discarded plastic is a feedstock, is worth something. It's just we have to be more economically efficient in the collection, in the sorting, and in the recycling. If you do that, not only you are solving the problem of the growing economies that still need to capture all the waste, but you're also working on the problem of the more developed economies where they capture the waste but they don't recycle it. They either burn it or they send it to other economies for them to recycle it. It's a question of economic incentives at this point.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's good to learn. And now let's talk about blue foods. So, what are blue foods?
Well, blue foods are, I would say, there's different definitions. But I'd say blue foods are foods that are produced in the blue economy, from the blue economy. So aquaculture and fisheries are traditionally the good examples of blue foods. There's a third model developing now, which is the synthetic protein, lab grown meat that is replacing fish from the sea, and that's also considered blue foods. Right? There is a more stringent definition, which is foods from the blue economy, but that are sustainable. So blue in the sense that is ocean sustainable. Um, I would say that there is sometimes we err on the definitions and on the nomenclature. I would say that for the larger audience, blue foods are sustainable foods that come from the blue economy. If they're not, they must become over time. We have to stop producing food in an unsustainable manner.
Yeah, I totally agree. And now let's talk about ocean warming because climate change is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast. So, let's talk about what are the implications of ocean warming.
So look, it's the ocean warming is if people if there is one area where panic, not panic, but where catastrophic concern is justified, is in ocean warming. Oceans are the largest pool of heat reservoir for the planet. They play a crucial role in climate regulation and climate management. There are weather phenomena that are quite stable, like the Gulf current, for instance, that are temperature dependent. If the Gulf current would break and would stop circling in the way we all know it works, there would be catastrophic implications for for the whole world. Not only countries in the Atlantic, but even countries in the Pacific would feel that. So I would say, that the ability for the ocean to regulate the weather and climate in general is a key concern. And so we have to understand that all of the human development is pretty much the last 5,000, 10,000 years. And the weather has been quite stable during that period. We don't know how our modes are compatible or incompatible with other weather patterns. And for instance, this example of the Gulf current is probably one of the most important ones. If that thing ever breaks, people can expect large amounts of of problems. The other one that people like to talk a lot is sea level rises. So ocean warming melts polar caps, and that raises the sea level, and that has all kinds of implication in terms of coastal development. I don't know if people know this, but climate change is a reality to the point that people that lend money to municipalities, investors that underwrite municipal bonds and coast and city bonds, those people are now pricing what's going to happen to those cities over the next 50 years. So it's not. I understand the world likes to live in the front page of the newspaper, but the ones that are behind and are actually have to make economic decisions of what's going to happen in the future, those are factoring in ocean warming as one of the key dynamic of changes. And then there is other levels of impact that are equally important. The ocean is a very stable environment. Everything that lives in the ocean evolved accustomed to that stability. And so the species are adapted to a certain temperature, a certain temperature profile, a certain change of gases, a certain concentration of things. And temperature changes all of those things. And so the effects on ecosystem, mass extinction of species, all of that is highly likely, and we just don't know when does it begin in earnest. Um, Ocean warming is really one of the most important things that we have to pay attention now. The world will self-regulate itself around the new temperature of the sea, whether that new way of regulating is supporting human life and human development. That's really the open-ended question.
Absolutely. That's a very important point there. And with that, we also come to the end of the main questions. And let's now do a rapid fire round wherein I'll ask you five quick questions about the fund and you have to give five quick answers. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right. So the first one goes, what are the sectors and regions you invest in?
So we invest in aquaculture, fisheries, seaweed, protein, and plastics. We invest globally, but our main mandate is to focus in European-based businesses. 65% of our capital will be deployed in in the EU.
Right. And what's the typical stage of investment?
We are an industrial fund. We like to invest in growth businesses, businesses that are established but are in their fast growth phase, post venture. But we also reserve the right to invest in businesses that are more mature, to buy them out, or to invest in businesses that are less mature. We typically won't go as seed or ideation, but we can go to a Series A. So anything above Series A is good for us, I would say.
Great. And what's the typical check size you put in?
Look, for late stage businesses, late stage ventures, we like to invest up to 5 million euros. Less than that, if possible. We those are businesses with a higher risk of execution. So I would say 2 to 5 is probably where we sit in. More industrial businesses, our core activity, we'll like to invest around 15 million euros per business or more.
Understood. So, in case any founder of a company wants to reach out, is there a way to get in touch with you?
Great. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn, on our website. We have the contact forms. We're quite present in the industry, so it's very easy to come across us in the conferences and in the industries. But feel free to reach out through our contact emails on our website.
Great. And where can our listeners follow you?
Ocean 14 has a big presence on the web, and I would encourage everybody to follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us or follow our publications. We are constantly out there. My partner Chris Gordell Barnes does a wonderful job of spreading our message, and he's constantly being interviewed in reference large scale publications and also industry publications. We're not hard to come by.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I would recommend our listeners to also go and follow the Instagram of Ocean 14. I came across the Instagram and it was really informative. I got to learn a good lot of things from there. Right. So
Great.
thank you so much for coming on, Francisco. I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes below and happy investing.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah.
All the best.
Thank you. Pleasure hosting.